Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. And this is Tom O'Connor from extremely hot and not so humid, surprisingly, New Orleans, where it's been around 100 degrees for, I don't know, for a long time, which is more than 2 days, which is way too long.
Feels like fun.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And as always, Rocky Messing is with me, and Rocky just told me he's in the country these days, our country, that is, basking in the land of pleasant living up in Maryland. And are you? I forget. Is Shimmy in Charm City, or is he actually like in?
Yeah, he's in Baltimore County. It's close enough.
Yeah. So we are happy to be joined today by Robert Smallwood. Robert is the CEO, publisher, chief cook and bottle washer of the InfoGov World Media, which includes publications and an upcoming conference, which you'll mention. And also one of the books I remember reading first about InfoGovernment's concept, strategies, and best practices from Wiley Publishing. And so, Robert, we're really interested in, we've got more of a, oh, there it is. Look at that. As I live and breathe, it's right there. The e-discovery world is finally, the light's gone on over people's heads, as we say in Boston, a light dawns on Marblehead. And people are realizing that, oh yeah, we need to know about how we store the data and what the principles are and how that's going on. You've spent your whole career in that world. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started and how you find yourself in that world?
Well, information governance is the first step in the e-discovery reference model. And so that's why all the interest in it, and the e-discovery companies in that software space are realizing if they can go a little upstream and clean things up, makes it a whole lot easier to go through those other steps of the e-discovery process. And I don't know, the way I got into it, I guess, starting way back, I started out at Burroughs Corporation selling computers, mainframes to banks in New Orleans, community banks, and managing. They have a Federal Reserve branch there that manages, all the checks and readers and sorters. Burroughs made these high-speed reader sorters, which would, sort the checks, and they bundle them up and send them back to the bank they were drawing them upon. And
was it on the corner of St. Charles and Boydris back then? Because that's where it is now.
Yeah, that's exactly where. Yeah.
And did you grow up in the South?
What's that?
Did you grow up in the South, or?
No, I grew up in Iowa, actually.
Okay.
I'm born and raised in the Midwest. I guess further south. My parents are from Southern Indiana, which is a little bit southern. So like people down there used to say wash instead of wash, So
I guess.
All my cousins from down there. But I moved to New Orleans right after college, and that was my first job was Burroughs, and selling computers to banks, but they had inline reader sorters which captured images of the checks while they were flying through those reader sorters. They captured a microfilm image of it. So that was my first sort of exposure to imaging, inline imaging. And then later, about 5 years later, I got a job with Wang Labs, and Wang Laboratories was the first company to have document imaging commercially. And, back then, when you scanned an image and you could see it on the screen, it was like rocket science. People were like, what? This was, 1980s, end of the.
Why couldn't you just take your phone and take a picture?
Didn't have phones. Yeah.
They didn't have phones. Yeah.
And people were just just blown away by it. But it had some problems because sending images, an image is like 50K per image, and so when you get a bunch of those in a folder, that was like a pig and a python when you're trying to send it down a telecommunications line, a big chunk of data. So the telecommunications side had to catch up. But Wang had this imaging which really took off with the big banks in New York, and they were using it in almost every department. And even if they used it just as a electronic file cabinet, it had great savings. But what they really found out and what they trained us was to look at the whole business process, re-engineer that process from scratch, just starting with a clean sheet of paper and adding in the imaging capabilities, so that now, you'd have a folder that you could have 3 people working on different parts of that folder at the same time, do a split of that, and at electronic speeds, and then merge it back together and move it through that process. So that was huge. Those were huge gains in productivity there. And then document imaging just then I went out on my own, and it kind of morphed into, you had to have document management because you got spreadsheets and word processing documents. And then you had to have cold computer output to Laserdisc, which was enterprise report management. Because now, before we had those green bar reports, big stacks of them that you would dump off, at the executive's desk, and they would look through it. But it was not very usable because it wasn't searchable, and you couldn't really do any if this, then that, kind of searches. And so they dumped it onto optical disk. And so it just grew and it became content management. And now content management includes, business process management. It includes, not only document imaging and document management, but, portals. And it's the companies like OpenText and Highland, Alfresco. Those are the content management companies. And it's, all these different parts and pieces together. And then then that market just kind of consolidated into about 5 or 6 big companies, which at its peak, it was huge. I mean, document imaging, we would go to these AIM conferences and there would be 35,000 people there. I mean, it was a
Massive,
huge, we're going from paper to digital. And then
I remember, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I remember the very first lit support product that I ever saw. It was Neil Aresti was doing an early version of his product, and it was on laser discs, as you said, which could store like a whopping I don't know, 100K.
It was gigabytes, which was huge back then.
Right.
Yeah.
To be able to clean up, scan all that paper and clean it up and get it onto optical disc. In fact, during Hurricane Katrina, Tulane Medical Center had optical disc, had stored their documents on optical disc, but like dummies, they were in the basement. They had the computer systems in the basement, so they all got flooded. But they were able to clean all them off and retrieve all that data afterwards, because it's a permanent medium. So even though it had that toxic soup that everything was flooded with, it survived that. And then document imaging and became content management, and that kind of morphed into, I think, information governance, which includes content management, but also includes all this other stuff, privacy and data protection, e-discovery, cybersecurity, data governance, even a little bit of infonomics and data monetization. And I guess I'm attracted to these, it's just more complex, the complexity of it all, trying to pull it all together. And, I just started doing research, and I would write on one topic at a time. I'd publish these reports like, information governance for the cloud, information governance for social media, information governance for mobile, information governance for SharePoint and all that. And then I bundled it up and I said, I did a proposal for a book to Wiley. Actually, I proposed 7 books, which was insane. But they gave me a 3-book deal, which almost broke my back, because just imagine you're trying to write 3 books, and basically every day that I worked, I would research all day and write, and then go to bed, and I still had 1,000 more days of research and writing ahead of me, every day. So it was basically 3 years of heads down research and writing. I thought I would just put these chapters together and put them in these books, but you have to update all the references. Everything has to be current when you turn it in. It's got to be, in a very specific format that legal checks first before they give you the green light. So it's a very tedious, lot of work, and there's 600 references, and they all have to be. And if you research a reference in January and that URL changed in June, well, you got to
Right.
go back and update it. They won't accept it, even though it's going to change again. But they won't accept it until all that's perfect. So it was
I
a
remember the
heck
first
of a
book
lot
I
of work.
wrote. The first book I wrote, the automated law firm. It was with Aspen Publishing out of New York, and I did the same thing. I did all my takes and I submitted it and everything. And one day, UPS delivers like this box, and it's literally a hard copy with markups, right? Like an editor had gone through and made notations. And I called them up and I said, well, where's the electronic version? Send me a disc. Don't you have this in Word or something? You go, oh no, it doesn't get to be electronic till it goes to the compositor, the printer.
Yes.
Right? It was like Bartleby the Scrivener.
Backwards. Right.
Right. I said,
Yeah.
I said, you gotta be kidding me. You want me to read through 500 pages
Right. And find each note. Right.
and look for the notes
Manually enter all those
that
things.
had been written in pencil. Yeah. Oh my God.
So,
Yeah.
so Robert,
So I feel your pain.
so Robert, when
So my plan was to, I wrote all these. I moved to Mexico, living on the beach, and I'm doing all this research and writing. And I thought, I'm counting up how many copies all the libraries would have to buy and all the universities would have to buy. And I thought, I just write these books and I'm done. I'm just going to sit on the beach, collect royalties, right?
Sure.
Well, first of all, it takes a little bit just to pay back your advance. Which, the best day in a writer's life is when you get the advance, but the worst day is when you have to start the work, and and so there just wasn't any money there. So it's like, well, I got to do something. So I started teaching classes online based on the books and electronic records management, because I have another book just as thick as that on electronic records management that I wrote prior, researched and wrote with input from a lot of people, 8 or 9 contributors. And so I taught electronic records management. And then information governance book was updated, some of those chapters, and expanded, and started teaching information governance classes. And that works out well. But the leap from not teaching to just finding the right software and starting to go online and teach. I remember before I started it, I saw that some couple had done it and they were teaching online. I'm like, wow, that would just be great. Just teach online. So, started going, and then I just had a basics and an advanced class. And then, so my students wanted me to teach the IGP, Information Governance Professional class, so they could get the certification from ARMA. Right. So I started teaching that before I even took the IGP exam. I started teaching it, based on, the outline of their materials. And I'd actually used a part of their outline, they called the DACOM chart, which is basically a curriculum for information governance. I used that partly to guide my chapters in my book. And so people were passing the exam, and then I went in to take the exam myself. And I remember, like, the first 10 questions, I was like, what are they asking here? This could be A, B, C, or D. And also they tell you that there's 10 questions that are samples that don't count, but they don't tell you which ones they are. Just testing the questions. And I'm like, this is probably the crappy questions that they're testing out.
Hopefully, maybe.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
So and I was like, man, at the time I'd written 6 books on information governance topics, and I was like, I do not know what they're asking here.
Right. Right. And the question that you have to ask yourself is, like, is it me? Have I just been teaching the wrong thing the whole time?
No, I was thinking, I was like, if I fail this exam and I'm teaching the class, this is going to be ultimate humiliation, right?
Yep.
But anyway, they let you skip them. You can see, and then I just came back to, like, okay, what is the answer ARMA is looking for?
Right.
Yeah,
doesn't matter what the reality is.
Right. What is the answer ARMA is looking for? So if there's something in there about records management, then that would give you a little clue. But there was a lot of just sort of, I don't know, trick questions, poorly worded, tough questions. There were some easy ones at the end, but I went through it 3 times because I don't like to get stuck and sit there for 5 minutes on a question and then you're way out in space. So just skip it and go to the next one that you can get, And then, but I never liked the IGP because it's very theoretical, and it's talking about a theoretical framework that's not really in reality. doesn't talk about the core components of information governance, which was privacy and cyber and e-discovery and data governance. And you have to know about all those pieces. Right. So then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, I'm gonna create a certification, one that truly tests what you have to know for information governance. So I got together this governing board of people from, well-accomplished people in the industry, from Wells Fargo and European Investment Bank, Pat Franks from San Jose State, Lee Isaacs from now DLA Piper, and a number of people that, Doug Laney, who's the Infonomics guru, and a number of people that I got together. Barry Brisicki does focuses on cyber. And so I had people that were experts in data governance, people that were experts in e-discovery, had Mike Quartarero on the board, and experts in records management, experts in Infonomics, Doug Laney, experts in privacy, and each one of those created questions for the exam. But the guideline was it had to be, somewhat covered in my book here, so that would tie the materials there. And so I had experts create those questions. We started with 30 questions and then 60, and I would give the exam to my board of governors volunteers to get feedback on it. And then we got up to 100 and finally 130, and I gave it to one of the most accomplished people in the industry, and she wasn't able to get 70% on it without studying. So when we knew we had a good exam there, you got to study. And since then it's held up very well. We've just, we've added a few modifications like the new ISO 24143, which is the information governance standard. But so it's held up very well. I mean, if you go to the class and you study, there's no trick questions. There's no sample questions that we're testing on. They all count. And it's been very successful. We've had companies like Honeywell, Delta Airlines, FedEx, of course, San Jose State, and Walmart, McDonald's, major law firms like DLA Piper and Kirkland and Ellis and Shepherd Mullen. So it's had really good market acceptance, I think. And that's just all I do. And since I live and breathe information governance, it pains me when people confuse it with data governance, which is more focused on structured data. But
so
I'm the only person that might bother.
Yeah, that begs the question, right?
Yeah. So I've got two questions. The first one is, can you, for a lot of the people who watch and listen, they're more towards the e-discovery side. So from your definition, define the difference between data governance and information governance. Let's start there.
Okay, so information governance is a holistic discipline that has multiple major facets that includes privacy, cybersecurity, e-discovery, data governance, a little bit of data monetization or infonomics for the value side of it. I define it in short as security, control, and optimization of information. By optimization, I mean maximizing its value while minimizing its costs. Whereas data governance is more in the business units, you'll have a data steward or a trustee that understands the applications in that business unit, and they're focused on trying to get good, clean data as close to the point of entry as possible. So, when you fill out a form for an airline ticket and you have to put in your zip code, you can't put in A, B, C, D, E. It has to be a valid zip code. That's enforcing data governance at the point of entry. And that way, all your downstream reports and analytics are more accurate. So it's focused on structured data in rows and columns as opposed to mostly unstructured, which is the focus of information governance, meaning PDFs, scanned documents, Word documents, Excel, emails, PowerPoints, all of that 80 or 90% of what people do all day. Structured information is databases, which is a lot of information, but it just doesn't take up that much space because it's just rows and columns.
So
I would say that.
To that point, what does it tell us about a data governance scheme for an airline when they think for 30 years now that my name is Thomas O. Connor?
And O is your middle name?
Yes.
Yeah.
O is my middle initial. Their
well,
data system is
they can't put it in
unable
there.
to read the hyphen in O'Connor in my last name.
Yeah, they
And,
didn't.
and likewise, if I have friends like Mary Pat Coquette, if you have somebody who has a hyphenated name.
I have
Right.
a friend named Paul St. Raymond. So Saint is one word, and it's usually ST period, but it
Right.
sometimes it's spelled out. So, you know, the cops could never nail him on a traffic ticket because they couldn't get his name right. He would just go back and say, "Oh, that's not, you didn't have the name right. Sorry."
Yep.
But,
And
I
you
was
would know
just-
this. I'm sorry, but
yesterday,
Robert, you might know this from having lived down here. There's of course streets like St. Charles Avenue. We have a big street up here in Mid City called Grand Route Saint, spelled ST period John, the Grand Route St. John. Everybody just calls Grand Route, but the post office, depending upon where the letters are coming from, goes nuts. They're like,
where's it
pulling
supposed
their
to actually go?
yeah.
well, I
Yeah.
was going to also talk a little about the nexus of information governance and e-discovery. My first exposure to e-discovery was with Wang Labs back in the 80s when they put me into selling to law firms, and that became, you know, the law firms. I mean, we had 9 of the top 10 law firms in New Orleans. You know, all of them used Wang word processing,
Sure.
and but Wang had litigation support software where they could, you know, you could scan documents, use OCR, convert it to text, and search it for, you know, patterns and phrases and words, keyword searches and so forth. And that was, you know, literally over 30 years ago. And so, you know, e-discovery software is light years ahead of that now, but that was, you know, pretty cool stuff back then.
It's been around,
Before that, the lawyers literally took page by page and, you know, separated out in a room full of boxes and say, is this responsive in this matter? Maybe. Okay. Is this? No. And they went through page by page. Now it's highly automated, a lot of AI and everything.
Was that your first interaction with attorneys?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think so. In the business world. Yeah.
Yeah. And
you probably didn't talk to any attorneys. You probably talked to paralegals and IT people. The attorneys.
We were always talking to the what is it? Not managing partner, but there's a whole organization, like the general manager of a law firm.
Like the CFO or the
no, it's gosh, it slips my
mind.
mind.
They have different titles.
Legal administrator, ALA, Association of Legal Administrators. Yeah, we were always talking to the legal administrator about you know, systems and all. So
you hit on something that I think has been overlooked. I think it's still being overlooked, and it's driving me nuts, especially with the advent of, dare I say it, AI. But that's security. It seems to be the piece that is not being touched on, or not being paid enough attention to. You know, we hear all these stories about how generative AI and open AI, you know, these companies are scraping data, personal data, to build their algorithms. And so we've got all these states passing security laws that don't even discuss any of this, and it's driving me nuts. But you mentioned it as one of the buckets of info governance. Yeah. Are we getting more attention? Are people starting to pay attention to that?
Yeah, I think, you know, with all the breaches and ransomware attacks and stuff, you know, one of the notable projects I worked on was Colonial Pipeline, and I did a full in-depth study there about 4 years ago or so. Maybe it's 5 now, and about 6-month deep dive. And, you know, they had really about the messiest information management system I'd ever seen in my life. You know, they would do a search for a document and get 5,000 hits or 0 hits, you know, and there was like one guy, there was one guy, Fred, in the basement who knew how to jigger the system that he could find it, but he was getting close to retirement. And, you know, the regulators would tell them, you need to be able to find these maintenance documents within 15 minutes or less. And it literally took them 3 weeks to find a maintenance document.
Wow.
So,
I was involved in a case down here years ago. Craig Ball was actually the discovery master, the special master. And it was the world's largest gaming institution was involved. And they had a Delphi database system that literally only one person knew how to ping, knew how to
Right.
extract information from. Everybody's entering information, and only this one woman, I forget, she wasn't located here. She was in one of the other, might have been, I forget what office she was in, but she was in a remote office. And of course, she became known as the Oracle of Delphi.
Right, of course.
She was, but she was literally, if you asked a question about the database, they said, "Oh, we got to call Brenda," or they would say, "No, get the Oracle on the phone." I don't know.
Yeah.
That stuff drives me nuts. Yeah.
Pretty risky. But
Yeah.
what I found at Colonial was that I was doing an interview in the business department, the business development, and I found out, so what's the most valuable information you have? Well, it's this here. And he said, this information, with this, you could become a billionaire pretty fast. I said, well, what is it? He said, well, this is our nomination system. It's who's ordering what gas and jet fuel and all to go through the pipeline from Houston through Atlanta all the way up to New York, or actually Newark. And so if you were a commodities broker in New York, investment banker, you could bet and win every time. You would know exactly how much of this product is being moved and which companies are buying it. And I said, well, where is it? How is it stored? Well, it's here in this Excel spreadsheet,
Wow.
And speaking about, security, there was just no security around it. And I thought, if he knows that that's worth billions, it's not going to be very long before somebody figures that out, or he just sells it to somebody,
Exactly.
you would
Yeah.
think. And so, I had these glaring warnings in this report that they had a high level of information risk, and specifically that department in that area. And that is exactly where the ransomware attack hit. They locked down the nomination system. So that's why they had to shut down the pipeline, because they didn't know who was ordering what. They didn't actually attack their operational technology. They just didn't know what the sales were and what the ordering was. So, and they hadn't done some of the most basic hygiene at all. And I was in there ostensibly to help them launch an information governance program with the person they hired to do that, who came to my training class. And the CIO ended up just deep sixing the information governance program, going all in on cybersecurity. And, cybersecurity is traditionally is protecting the perimeter and trying to harden that firewall and keep people out and keep the bad guys out. And that's information, that's security from the outside in. Information governance is more security from the inside out, where we go in, inventory your information assets, find out what's the most important, the most valuable crown jewels, and lock those down with the appropriate encryption or similar tools, so that if the bad guys do get in, and we all know they can get in, they can't get to the crown jewels. So they killed it. Now, later they had the ransomware attack, had to pay $5 million. They wanted to be under the radar. They didn't want anybody to know anything about their operations, because they have 2,000 miles of exposed pipeline that, like in Mexico, the cartels, they just drill holes in them and start stealing the gas.
Wow.
So they don't want that to happen. They have that exposure. And in fact, when you go to their offices in Alpharetta, Georgia, it doesn't even say Colonial Pipeline. It doesn't say anything. They wanted to be under the radar. And after that breach, that ransomware attack, now everybody knew of them. They were blasted all over Associated Press, all over the world. And the CEO had to go to Capitol Hill and testify about it. Then, and the whole proposal for information governance was like, a million, less than $1.2 million, $1.3 million over a couple of years. They could have cleaned all that up. They would have got rid of all the shared drives. We would have put it into a managed environment, content services environment, and got it all cleaned up. But the executives, they're making so much money. They have $1 billion of revenue and only 1,000 employees. That's $1 million per employee, which is very high. A profitable company has maybe 200 grand per employee. 100 grand is pretty good. 200 is really good, but $1 million. So they're kicking back outrageous 400 million a year in profits, and more. So they're like, well, we must be doing something right. We're making all this money.
Right.
And I tried to warn them about these issues, and the guy literally kicked back on his desk, put his feet up, put his cowboy boots up on the desk, and said, well, we got cyber insurance to cover that.
Nice.
So let me ask, Tom had mentioned at the beginning that you've started a InfoGov conference, correct?
Yeah.
And obviously part of that is about the education and trying to get people to be aware of these types of issues and be aware of the risk involved of not having a solid InfoGov plan. So how long have you been putting on the conference? Give us a little details about it and kind of what types of people should be looking at that, because obviously a lot of the people who are in the e-discovery side who are trying to get further and further to the left, like you had mentioned in terms of realizing that there's value there. Is this the type of thing that they should be interested in as well?
Yeah, the whole idea is to try to have expert sessions on all of those major facets of information governance. So like, Tom will be giving his update on the e-discovery important cases of 2023 and be on the e-discovery panel discussion. But we also have whole tracks on privacy, whole tracks on data governance, whole tracks on cybersecurity and risk, and whole track on we have some things. AI governance is the new thing, is the big thing this year. We got a whole lot of AI governance courses
Really, I'm shocked.
Yeah, and those in some M365 purview stuff. Also records management. So some specific RIM, like Monica Crocker from Wells Fargo is going to talk about. I like big buckets. I cannot lie. Retention schedule simplification. And the others that are more general will be on like IG best practices. But we've got some case studies, like USAA is coming in with their team talk about their data governance session, wow. Governance program. We've got the e-discovery manager, legal and technology records manager from Land O'Lakes is going to talk about, Ben Green is going to talk about managing e-discovery and legal holds. So there's something for everybody. The idea is to cross-train you. So, if you're an e-discovery person, you're going to be interested in those e-discovery sessions, but you're also going to want to learn a little about privacy and a little about cyber and a little more about data governance or just information governance best practices. And same thing if you're in privacy. This is going to be October 2nd to 4th. The second is the pre-cons, and one of them is AI governance, pre-cons. One of them is policy development. One of them is our CIGO certified IG officer training. Then the third and fourth are the conference sessions, but also IAPP, the big privacy association, has their conference in San Diego the 5th and 6th. So about 3,000 people from the privacy, it's called privacy, security, and risk. So mostly privacy people, but some people in cyber and information risk will be there. And so our day 2, the day just before theirs, we focus on privacy and cybersecurity. So if people want to come in a day early, they can catch that and go to hit 2 birds with 1 stone. Some of our sponsors are exhibiting at both conferences because there's a lot of overlap there. Privacy, security, and risk, that's basically information governance. And this is an IG conference. So it dovetails nicely. So, I think if you're in e-discovery and you want to learn more about how that fits into the bigger picture of information governance, or what some of the precursors are there in terms of just getting things cleaned up from a data governance standpoint, this is a way you can get all of that cross training. And IG programs are run by cross-functional teams, and typically on those teams, a steering committee will have somebody from what we call the IG reference model, those major components of the IG reference model, which is a person from privacy, a person from cybersecurity, a person from legal, general counsel usually, a person from IT, person from records management, and maybe a person from audit. At the very minimum, they have to have a seat at the table. So that whole team could come in and cross-train by going to this conference. And it's not going to be a huge conference. We're holding it at a quaint, charming hotel, which kind of reminds me of New Orleans, Tom, because it's got this quaint Spanish colonial courtyard, with the wrought iron and open, and that's where we'll have all of the food and drinks and receptions and all. And it's a oldest hotel in San Diego. although it's been rebuilt brick by brick. And Wyatt Earp and his wife stayed there once when he was in town. So it's got a lot of history in it, and it's just a charming location. And next to it is the Horton Grand Theater, which is a playhouse, literally. So it's got that incline seating with good acoustics, and that's where we'll do the keynotes and the panel discussions. So it's a real nice venue. So looking forward to that.
I'm just looking at.
And we did it.
On
This
100
is the
degrees.
third. Yeah. Well, we haven't even hit 80 out here.
Oh, God.
I'm on the beach at, I'm literally the Pacific Ocean is 50 yards away here. And it's been 70, 72, a nice breeze and a little chilly at night.
Oh, stop. You're killing me.
So
Yeah.
not bad. But the conference, this is the third year, but for the first 2 years we did it virtually because of COVID. So we try to make it fun. Like we have gamification where you can compete for points and prizes. We'll have that same opportunity in the app that we're using this year, only it'll be physically in person. So you get points for going to a session, you get points for reviewing the session. You get points for going to a vendor booth. So you can get points and prizes, and we give away, Amazon gift cards, Starbucks cards, signed books, discounts on training, things like that to make it a little more engaging and fun. And I was surprised last year, people really got seriously into it,
Sure, you give them a chance to compete and
People get competitive. Yep.
Yeah, we had like Iggy the IG Iguana. We have Iggy the IG Iguana. And if you could find Iggy and click on him, you got some extra points.
Love it.
So it was like, where's Waldo? Where's Waldo? But he'd be hidden here and there. So
Right.
I haven't figured out how to do that in the real environment unless I get an Iggy costume made.
Okay. So unfortunately, we're running out of time. So we want to ask you a couple of questions to just learn a little bit more about you, and then we'll wrap this up. So ready? Some rapid fire. Ready?
Okay.
Chicago or New York pizza?
I mean, I grew up near Chicago. I gotta say Chicago, deep dish. I know Anthony Bourdain says it's a freaking casserole, but that's what I grew up with. But I do like thin crust as well. But we used to go have these pizzas and they would be this thick,
Okay, if you can live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Well, if not Mexico, I think maybe Buenos Aires. The Paris in South America, because I can speak Spanish más o menos. So that's where I'm planning on going. Some friends of mine and I were going to take a motorcycle ride from Buenos Aires. We're going to track the same route that Che Guevara did in the Motorcycle Diaries. So so go from Buenos Aires across Argentina to Santiago, Chile, to Lima, Peru, up through Colombia, up into Caracas, Venezuela. So I'm trying to pitch my agent on a book on that, and I wrote the first part. He goes, well, you're gonna have to write at least 3,000 words. I'm like, well, we haven't started it yet.
Right, give me some time. Right.
Yeah. So he went. He pitched it around, and they said, the guy didn't love the writing. And I'm like, oh, okay, really? So I pulled out some of my writing that I did for my first trip to Havana 15 years ago, and it is racy. I got in a street fight. There was hot Cuban women. There's drinking. It was wild. And then I ran out of money early because you can't get money out of ATMs there. So I got stuck at the Hotel Nacional, which is where Churchill and Brando and Sinatra and all those guys stayed. And they had a breakfast buffet, but I was out of cash, so I'd just eat everything at breakfast, and I put boiled eggs into my pockets to eat for lunch and dinner. And then, finally, like the last day, I was able to get, my brother was in Mexico, got a friend to put up a Mexican credit card, and I was able to get out of there. Then I get to the airport, and there's a $35 exit tax, and I have no cash.
And you have no money, and you're like, okay.
Can't get any. And I literally begged people for it. And one guy, IT guy from the UK, paid my exit tax out of there. So I was like, phew, next time I went back, I had an account from Mexico. I could use the ATMs there.
Right.
But so I wrote that, and I sent that stuff in, which is a lot more exciting and racy. And I'm waiting to hear on that. But I want to do a book out of it. And of course, we'll do like YouTube stuff. So yeah, Buenos Aires, I think, is where I would say Paris, but Buenos Aires.
Okay. Tom, let's go with your final two questions.
Okay, so I got one rapid fire question. Beatles or Stones?
What is it?
Beatles or Stones?
Sometimes I'm in the mood for either one, but I'd have to say Stones.
There we go. I knew I
Yeah.
liked you for a reason. It's a long-standing dispute between Rocky and I.
Okay.
But our last question, one we ask everybody, if you could spend a day with anybody from our field, our business, broadly taken, and that person could be someone living or someone who's passed, who would that person be, and what would you do? It doesn't have to be work related. You could go on a motorcycle ride. You could, go fishing on the beach in Mexico. Who would it be, and what would you do?
Well, I thought about it. I'd have to say Paul Burdick. He was my mentor at Wang Labs, and
Okay.
He worked for IBM for years, and he was this tiny little man, but he was a prince of a guy, and he had some kind of deformity where his hands were a little messed up, but he was just so smart and insightful. And I was like this bull in a china shop, at Wang, and I'd be like, well, these guys are wrong. He'd tell me things like, do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? So, in other words, just shut up. And
Right.
and this is how he learned to move up the ladder at IBM, I guess. Do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? Do you have to win this argument or just let it pass and go on? And then, every time I walk by the trolley, I think of this. He also told me, he said, people still get hit by trains. And in other words, just don't do anything stupid.
Right.
People
Smart.
just get hit by
Smart.
trains, which is interesting because a couple of days ago I was in San Diego and I'm walking along the trolley. I'm walking and I'm maybe 8-10 feet away from it, and somebody in traffic is yelling. They're stopped in traffic, and I'm looking around. I don't know anybody here. What are they? I'm looking around, yelling. And then I look up and I see this dog running right along the tracks next to the train, loose with his leash on. So I just bent down, grabbed the pup. It was a big dog, but I held on to it. And the master frantically ran up and grabbed the leash. And because the dog was just, the horn was blaring and it was scaring the heck out of the dog, So she might have run under the track. So I saved that doggy. I was like, wow, I just saved the dog's life, but anybody would do it. But I'm a dog lover, and I think the dog felt safe when I put my hands around it, and I just held her there because just grabbed her so she wouldn't run into the train. So yeah, people still get hit by trains, and so Paul Burdick was my mentor. I think he's probably passed away by now, but
And what would you do?
40 years ago, what would I do?
Yeah.
He was from like Chattanooga, Tennessee. I would like to just have him take me around, his stomping grounds and tell me about, some of the history and what it's like there. But he was a pioneer with Wang Labs with the first document imaging system implemented at Provident Life in Tennessee. And the person he worked with was Tom Tillis, who's now a senator from North Carolina.
Yep,
So
yep.
Tom Tillis was one of our top. He was really good in the computer business. He was our top document imaging guys, and then later he went to work for IBM and made lots of money. And then he ended up. I don't agree with his politics, but he goes too far right. He's like, well, people should have the option to not wash their hands. Well, no, not if they're at work. They need to wash their hands, Tom. So. But anyway, Paul Burdick would be my guess because he was just a good, sensible man.
We all need some of those in our lives.
Yeah.
You want to do a great motorcycle, or there's some great motorcycle riding up there in Tennessee. You got the.
I bet with those mountains, Blue
You
Ridge.
get the mountains and down into or up into the Carolinas, the Dragon's Tail and the Natchez Trace, which goes all the way down to Natchez, Mississippi, on the Mississippi, and which is a wonderful ride because no trucks allowed and a 45 or 50 mile per hour speed limit. It's through mostly national forests. It's a great ride on a motorcycle.
Wow, sounds great.
Well, Robert, thanks so much for the time. We appreciate your sharing your thoughts with us, and I look I look forward to seeing you in San Diego.
Yeah,
Um,
very
and
good.
Rocky, I don't know where I'll see you next.
We'll figure out something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Relativity Fest. You going to Relativity Fest?
Chicago for Relativity. Yep.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Chicago for-
Yeah.
So
That's in the
Uh,
spring, huh? In the
No, no,
spring?
no. It's in September this year. It's the week before your conference.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why, I guess availability or whatever, but yeah, I just booked my train ticket to go up. So I'll be riding the
Train?
city of New Orleans. Yeah, I
Oh,
take
I've done that. I've done that many times. The city of
Right?
New Orleans, straight
Right?
up to Chicago. Yeah.
Right. I
Up through
love that.
Memphis, straight up to Chicago.
Yep.
It's,
Changing cars in Memphis, Tennessee.
yeah, it's a
Great
nice
ride.
ride. If you get a
Yeah.
little, one of those little booth spaces, it's a breeze.
That's it. I get one of the little roomettes and
Yeah,
I love it. I love
yeah,
it.
and the food is better than you would expect.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
it's very good.
Surprisingly
So,
good.
it's the only way to fly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great, and you can
All
walk
right.
around, read, think. It's great.
Yep. Yep. Well, thank you again, Robert. Appreciate you
Thank
taking
you
the time
guys.
for this. And
It was fun. I appreciate it.
you betcha. We'll for all the rest of our viewers, we'll see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.
Very good.